In a sealed tomb built for the dead, archaeologists expected the usual language of burial: stone, bone, clay, gold. Symbols they had seen before. But among those familiar objects was something else. Something small enough to fit in the palm of a hand, and strange enough to stop the entire excavation. It did not resemble a tool. It did not resemble jewelry. It did not match the tomb's age, its customs, or the logic of the world around it. And centuries after it was buried, no one can say with confidence what it was for. The object was found deep inside a stone burial chamber cut beneath a forgotten hillside necropolis. The tomb itself had remained mostly undisturbed. Its entrance had been sealed by collapsed masonry and compacted earth, preserving a stillness that had survived for centuries. Inside, excavators uncovered the expected signs of ritual burial: fragments of linen, ceremonial vessels, a wooden bier reduced to stains and splinters, and the remains of a high-status individual placed carefully at the center of the chamber. The tiny object was not displayed like treasure. It was not mounted, worn, or embedded in decoration. It lay near the right side of the skeleton, partly hidden beneath dust and fallen plaster, as if it had either been placed with deliberate care or dropped there during the final moments before the tomb was sealed. At first glance, it looked too refined to be accidental and too unfamiliar to be ordinary. That was the beginning of the problem. Everything around it belonged to a known funerary tradition. The object did not. It was small, palm-sized, oval, dense in appearance, with the weight and silence of polished stone. Its color sat somewhere between dark green and black, the surface carrying a dull mineral sheen that only caught the light at certain angles. Along one face, thin-etched concentric lines spread outward with deliberate precision, as though someone had wanted to center the eye on a single point. Near one edge were 3 tiny drilled holes, spaced unevenly but clearly intentional. Not large enough for a hand grip. Not arranged neatly enough to suggest decoration alone. Across the front ran a hairline crack, old and stable, as though the object had been damaged long before it was buried. Its corners were worn smooth, not by the erosion of centuries underground, but by repeated contact over time. It did not look ceremonial in the obvious sense. It did not shine like prestige. It looked handled, used, known to somebody, and then buried forever in darkness. What made the object disturbing was not only its shape, but its refusal to fit into any category. Tomb goods usually speak clearly. A bowl is a bowl. A blade is a blade. An amulet announces itself through symbols, material, or placement. This item seemed to withhold all of that. It carried markings, but not readable writing. It had holes, but no obvious mounting system. It was polished, but not ornamental. Portable, but with no agreed function. Its material raised further questions. The polished stone appeared to come from a source not commonly associated with the burial chamber's immediate region, suggesting either trade, transport, or later intrusion. Yet the burial context around it showed no obvious sign of disturbance. If the tomb had been robbed and resettled, the evidence was subtle enough to escape certainty. Then there was its placement. Near the body, but not worn on it. Close enough to matter, distant enough to be ambiguous. That alone split experts into opposing camps. Was it a personal object? A ritual device? A marker of rank? Or something brought into the tomb by mistake? The deeper it was studied, the stranger it became. Every detail suggested intention. But none of those intentions were clear. The first theory is that it was a ritual instrument. In many ancient burials, objects were included not for practical use in life, but for symbolic use in death. The concentric lines may have represented cosmology, the passage of the soul, or a protective pattern intended to guide the deceased beyond the tomb. The 3 tiny holes could have held thread, wire, or some perishable attachment now lost. In this interpretation, the object was never meant to make sense to us as a tool. It was meant to operate within a belief system now only partially visible. But that explanation struggles with the where. If it was made only for burial, why are its corners smoothed by repeated handling? Why is the surface worn in a way that suggests long use before interment? That leads to the second theory: it was a personal possession. Something carried, touched, and kept close in life before being buried with its owner. Perhaps it was an identifier of status, a family relic, a gaming piece, or an object of private devotion. The crack may even hint at age and long-term value. People do not always bury the dead with things that outsiders understand. Sometimes they bury them with what mattered most. Yet this theory also fails to answer the core question. If it was personal, why is there no close comparison anywhere else in the burial record? Personal items usually still belong to broader traditions. This object stands almost alone. The third theory is more practical. Some researchers have proposed that it may have been a component of a larger mechanism or fitted object. The drilled holes imply attachment. The polished face may have rested against wood, leather, or textile now decayed. In this version, the object we see is only the surviving fragment of something more complete: a clasp, a measuring aid, a weighted fitting, or part of a device whose organic elements vanished underground. That possibility is attractive because it explains the holes and the where at the same time. But it creates another issue. If it was just one surviving piece of a larger assembly, where is the rest of it? Why was it found alone, in a tomb, beside the dead? A fourth theory moves in a different direction. Some believe the object may predate the tomb itself. Not younger, but older. A curated relic from a much earlier time, collected and placed in the burial as an heirloom or sacred antiquity. Ancient people were already surrounded by the remains of older civilizations. To them, an object from the distant past could have carried deep power. The tomb occupant may have been buried not with a contemporary item, but with something already ancient in their own lifetime. This would explain its uniqueness. It may never have belonged to the culture of the tomb at all. But even that leaves one final problem. If it was already old, where did it originally come from, and what did it mean before it entered the grave? And then there is the most unsettling theory of all: that the object belongs to a category we still have not recognized. Not a failed match. Not a missing fragment. Not a damaged ornament. But an entirely different kind of thing, one that sits outside the labels modern archaeology prefers. That possibility is harder to publish, harder to prove, and much harder to live with. Because it suggests the real mystery is not the artifact alone, but the limits of our own understanding. After analysis of shape, wear, material, and placement, one question remains heavier than all the others. Why was this object buried in that tomb at all? Not merely how old it was. Not merely who made it. But why it crossed the threshold into the chamber of the dead. Burial is rarely random. Space inside a sealed tomb is meaningful. To place something beside the body is to say it belongs there. To say it must go with the dead. Whatever this object once did, or meant, someone made the decision that it could not remain among the living. That decision has outlasted every explanation. Today, the tiny object sits under controlled light, measured, catalogued, and studied from every angle. Its stone surface still reflects the same cold sheen. Its concentric lines still pull the eye inward. Its 3 drilled holes still promise an answer they never give. In the tomb, it was silent. In the lab, it is silent still. and perhaps that is what makes it so unnerving. Not that it came from the ancient world, but that the ancient world took its meaning with it.